Tonight, we're diving into a story where the past isn't just recorded, it's still roaming the halls. Imagine buying the oldest house in your city, only to discover the family that built it 2 centuries ago never really left. My guest tonight owns that house, investigates it, and wrote a book on haunted history. Welcome back to The Common Historian, where history meets the supernatural. I'm Jeremy, and each week we explore the haunting intersections between our past and the paranormal. Tonight, I am joined by Eric Freeman Sims, paranormal investigator and author with over 20 years in the field, and host of the Unseen Paranormal podcast, and author of Small Town Haunts and Legends of Tennessee, and the owner of the historic Night House in Hopkinsville, Tennessee, and the event coordinator behind GoblinCon. So grab your favorite beverage, dim the lights, and prepare to journey into the world where history refuses to stay buried. Welcome, Eric.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
I know we have a lot to cover tonight, so I'll kind of, you know, jump right in.
Yeah.
When you first walked through the Night House, before you even knew its history, what did the place feel like to you? And when did you realize that it wasn't just an old house?
Well, the first time we went there, I knew a little bit of the history, but not a lot of the history was available. But I knew the house was the oldest house still standing in the whole county and one of the oldest in Kentucky, and that it was 210 years old. And the house had never been abandoned. It had always been a family home. And only until we bought it, we became the seventh owners in the entire 210 years, which is incredible.
Wow.
But yeah, when we first walked through the house, it was a very welcoming feeling when you went in the door. Like the energy just felt welcoming, just like a family home. They welcomed you in. But as we walked around, it kind of felt like somebody's following you, and not in a creepy way, but just curious. Looking over your shoulder, like, what are you doing? And then on the way home, we just talked like we already owned it, because it just that feeling was just there of like they almost like the spirits wanted us to own it, and thought that
Well,
we would be good stewards of it. But yeah, I definitely have the feeling of being haunted, especially after 20 years as an investigator. You kind of walk in and you can kind of feel the energies either there or not. But also, we were more interested in the history than really the hauntings, because the house is on 3 acres and it's zoned residential, so it very well could have been torn down. So a developer could have bought it, torn it down, built 3 houses on there or more. And
yeah,
so it was a lot more about saving the history, and I was pretty sure the paranormal was there to help with that. And so
yeah.
it's not about making money, anything like that. All the money that we take in goes right back into the house. So all the ghost hunts that we do, the private investigation on the weekends, the public stuff that we do, just all goes right back in the house, and it's to help pay the bills, because you have electricity and internet and all that type of stuff. So, but yeah, it definitely had a feeling to it, but a very welcoming feeling, and that's the kind of the biggest comment we get from every weekend from the investigators is like, I just feel so comfortable here, like they're just welcoming me in to share their house.
Wow. Yeah, that's really nice. So I know you go to some locations and you don't get that welcoming feeling.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Now, can you take us through kind of the Knight family, who they were, and kind of a little bit of a history on the house?
Yeah, yeah. So JB and Eliza Knight were the fourth owners of the house. They purchased the house in 1860, and they had 7 kids when they moved in. And their JB Knight was an attorney, but he made his money in real estate. He did business all over the eastern United States, from New York to Chicago to New Orleans to, I mean, he was all over the place. He owned thousands and thousands of acres. He owned many buildings that he rented out. And in 1850, 1860s, he's worth about $40 million in today's money, with all the property he owned and yeah, all that. So, and they raised all their kids in the Knight house. We call it the Knight house because JB Knight did the most changes to the house, and they lived there the longest. They were there for 85 of the 210-year history until
Oh,
their family died off and it was sold out. But yeah, JB Knight, the house originally was just, if you look at pictures, it's just a red brick structure. It's federal style. So very kind of Lego blocky, not a whole lot of interest. It was just kind of the style back in the early 1800s. And JB Knight changed the house to Greek Revival. So the big columns that you see on the side porch, the front porch, he added the dining room on, added a master bedroom on, moved some staircases around, did a lot of changes to the house. And so, and changed all the mantles out to Greek Revival. So just kind of that style of architecture. And like we have the original handwritten contract for the front porch still. It was $110, materials and all, from the contractor in the 1860s. Yeah, so crazy cheap. But and you're talking about, all handmade lumber and things like that. So, but yeah, he did the most changes to the house. There's 7 kids. They're all young. I think the oldest one was maybe 10 or 11. Robert, the oldest son. They had 4 sons and 3 daughters. All of their kids except for one daughter went to college at Bethel College in Virginia. And Robert, the oldest son, is the only son out of 4 that did not become an attorney like his father.
Oh,
Just because they became attorneys doesn't mean they practice law that much. John Jr., the second son, in 1871, he had just become a lawyer and he was 24. Well, the Great Chicago Fire of 1871 burnt down a rental building, a really high class apartment building that J.B. Knight owned. And so he sent John Jr. to Chicago to oversee the rebuilding of it. And he never came back to Hopkinsville. He ended up standing up there, starting his own law firm. And then he got into real estate in Chicago and became a huge real estate mogul and socialite. And he ended up living in Chicago until he passes away in 1929. And then the next son, Charlie, he becomes an attorney. He practices law a little bit with his dad. But in 1883, he became the president of the Western Kentucky Lunatic Asylum, which is about a mile down the road from the house. It's still there today. It's been there since 1848. Still in operation. Now it's called Western State Hospital, but it's a mental hospital for criminally insane to outpatient to, that short-term stays, things like that. But he served on the board either as the president or as a commissioner on the board running the hospital until 1921. And there was a big scandal in the newspapers because the new governor didn't like him. He didn't like the new governor coming in, and the governor's one appointed the board and stuff. So they ousted him, and then he died in the house in 1924. The next kid is Carrie. She, whenever her brother Charlie came back from college in Bethel College in Virginia, he brought his best friend with him and his roommate in college, a guy named James Harding. And he moves into the Knight house with them and lives there for quite a while. Well, Carrie is a few years younger than them. She goes to college. She comes back. Her and James Harding fall in love, and they have 4 kids. Their oldest son is the only one that lives. They had 1 die in infancy and 2 died as toddlers. Well, at the age of 25, Carrie contracts tuberculosis and dies in the house of tuberculosis. And her husband, James, and their son, Leon, moved to Nashville. And he goes on to get remarried and does lots of things in Nashville. But the next daughter, Kate, she goes to college, but she never has a chance to get married and have kids. At the age of 22, a year after Carrie dies of tuberculosis, she died of tuberculosis in the house as well. And then the third daughter, Ida, she does not go to college and don't know why. And she never gets married, never had kids. But she stays in the house pretty much her entire life. She was just like 2 years old when they moved in. And she lives there her whole life and dies in the house in 1938. Their youngest son, Thomas, becomes a lawyer. He becomes a lawyer in 1883. But he makes his money in insurance and real estate. And he gets married, but doesn't have any kids. He gets married to a lady named Kate. They move actually to his uncle's house, his mom's brother's house that he inherits on 17th and Main. And the house faces Main Street. Well, he had so much money and they were so rich that he had them pick up the house and turn it to face 17th. Yeah, and this is back in the 1880s. So, and it stayed that way until it burned down in 2014. His wife dies quite a few years before him, and he moves back into the house while Charlie is still alive in the 20s, and he ends up dying a year after Ida in 1939. J.B. Knight dies in 1879, and his wife dies in 1886. So when the last son, Thomas, dies, the house is left to Leon, Carrie's son, the only surviving son. That's the oldest grandchild. And he is getting his affairs in order in Nashville and is going to move to the house. But he's having renovations done. Well, he dies unexpectedly in 1942. So,
oh my.
the house is kind of up in the air, and the extended family couldn't afford to update it because they needed modern plumbing. By then, we're getting into the 1940s, modern electricity, they were still using fireplaces and lanterns and things. And the extended family were all just like poor farmers and stuff, so they couldn't really do it with a big house like that. So they sold it out of the family, but they had a big estate sale and sold every piece of furniture that the Knights had, and they took all the pictures and portraits. So we don't have any original Knight furniture, or we've had very few pictures of just a couple members of the family. But that's kind of the story of the Knights in a gist. JB Knight was a mover and shaker in town. He partnered up with the first owner of the house, J.P. Campbell. They partnered up and were friends, and they started the first female college in town in 1841. He did lots of things like that. JB did helped build lots of the downtown buildings that are still standing in
Wow.
Hopkinsville. He was on the board to bring the railroad through town, which became very important because about 20 minutes down the street we have Fort Campbell Army Base with the 101st Airborne Station, and Fort Campbell is, I don't think it's the biggest Army base anymore, but at one time it was the biggest Army base in the world. Yeah, Fort Campbell's massive. I think there's over 100,000 troops stationed there and their families. So
Well,
yeah, a lot. And so
yeah.
if you don't have the railroad come from Nashville up through that area, then you don't have Fort Campbell. And so that area is not as vibrant as it is today, or as populated, and probably not Nashville either, you know. But Jamie Knight did a lot of things to bring Hopkinsville along throughout the years.
Yeah, it sounds like he did quite a bit. Probably helped establish the town,
Yeah.
make sure it survived what it is today. Now, what has happened in the house, that kind of has made you believe that the people are trying to communicate? What types of hauntings are you seeing in the house?
The question is what hasn't happened. Actually, at the end of this month, at the end of April here, it will be 2 years that we've owned the house. And it's everything. I mean, we've experienced everything over the past 2 years. And things happen, I mean, any hour of the day or night. They make themselves known for different reasons, I guess. If they like what we're doing in the house, remodeling wise, they'll let us know. If they don't like it, they're quick to let us know as well through various means. And but no, I've seen full body apparitions. So has other people in the house and on the property outside too. We hear disembodied voices. That's happened quite a few times. That's where they kind of echo through the house. That's how loud they are. It's not one of the things we ever can understand what they're saying because they're kind of off in the distance. But it's like a female voice, especially. I've had my shirt tugged. So has several other people. You know, EVPs, the spirit box. They know how to communicate through the spirit box. The tripwire. They now love the tripwire. The dead bell, things like that. So, but yeah, just kind of all manner of experiences. And just about every team that comes to the house, they're active for them.
Well, that's
And
good.
and they communicate. And so just about every team will have at least a handful of things happen, that they can't explain. And so it's pretty unique place in that because, you investigate long enough, it's like fishing. You can go somewhere, sit all night and not get anything. And,
Yeah.
and so some places it's few and far between, but we think just because there's such a long history with the house and the previous owners really didn't care about the paranormal, it was just a residence of them, especially in modern history. The last owners was just a husband and wife, and they owned it for 10 years before we bought it from them. And I was told by the neighbor that the wife would have stuff happen in the house and it scared her. So she would come out and sit on the porch until her husband got home from work. And so I guess just being ignored for so many years, and then people coming in the house and I walk through and talk to them like they're living and just say, hey, we got people in the house tonight, that want to come see your beautiful house and hear your story and talk to you. And I think they enjoy that. I really do,
Yeah.
especially showing off the house.
I'm going on my first investigation May 16th to the Wildwood Sanitarium in New
Yeah.
York. I don't know if you are familiar with it, but I'm hoping to have a good night.
Yeah.
Been told that's very active. So excited about that. But I lived in a haunted house for 2 years. Fortunately, when we moved out, we had rented it and they had tore it down. But I saw full body apparitions. We heard phantom babies crying.
Yeah.
There was, lots of knocking and shadow people, and it was of course back then I was not I was into the paranormal, but I wasn't, you know, if I would have now lived there, I would have probably been, recording and
Right. Right. Yeah.
So what's your most personally unsettling experience you had at the
I've had so many experiences over the years. And I kind of like, I mean, I'm to the point now where when something happens, I run toward it. Not for the thrill of it, but for the sole purpose of debunking it if I can,
Yeah.
Because if I see, somebody poke their head out of a room down the hallway, I'm going down there to see if there's a person in there, because
Yeah.
I'm more afraid of people than I am ghosts. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
I'd say one of the craziest experiences I ever had. I've had so many, it's hard to pinpoint. But when I was younger, before because I started investigating when I was a teenager, before the TV shows were on and everything, we used to sneak into an old plantation, onto the grounds of an old plantation, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, and I had a ghost horse run through me. And
Oh,
we're walking across this field to get from the house back to where we had parked. And it's probably a good football field long. And they hadn't cut the field in a while. It was about knee deep grass. And two of my buddies are behind me, and one is way, way ahead of us. But we hear to our left, we hear horse galloping. And my friends are coming on it too, and they're about probably 20 feet behind me. And so we're kind of having this conversation like, yeah, are you hearing this horse? And we just continue to hear it. And it gets closer and closer and closer. And then all of a sudden, this weird wind static feeling like my whole body was charged with static, goosebumps all over, kind of whooshes through me. And then I look to the right and you can see the grass moving in a straight line to the right. But I'm hearing this horse the entire time. It gets louder and louder until it gets to me and it's really loud and then it kind of fades off. And my friends say they watched that straight line of grass start from the left before I saw it. Because I'm just looking where I'm going. It's dark. We're just going by the moonlight. And they saw that straight line of grass moving right before it got to me and then watched it run out the other. So they run up and they're like, what in the hell just happened? Like, did that ghost horse just run through you? I'm like, I have no idea. But it was one of the weirdest feelings because it was like, it's really hard to describe because it was static electricity, but also being underwater briefly too. Like, I don't know. It's really weird, but also feeling the cold wind, like this cold wind go through you. So that was a really weird experience very early on when I started investigating. I was probably 16 or 17 when that happened.
wow.
Yeah. Yeah. But I've seen some incredible things. I mean, and experienced some incredible things in the paranormal. I mean, I've seen full body apparitions. I've seen things move on their own. I mean, heard plenty of voices. I've had plenty of times that I've had them whisper in my ear. And yeah, just all kind of crazy stuff.
Yeah.
One time I watched one of the most unbelievable things I ever saw. I watched a cell phone lift me and two other people. So it wasn't just me. Lift up off the table, move over a foot, and drop in the floor.
Yeah.
So it levitated,
Wow.
dropped in the floor. Yeah. That was the Octagon Hall in
Wow.
Franklin, Kentucky. Yeah. Which Octagon Hall is notorious anyway, and all the TV shows and stuff. But yeah,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
was pretty insane.
Yeah. And I know, like, seeing a full body apparition, I've seen 2 or 3 just in the house that I lived in.
Yeah.
And I know that there's some investigators that I've heard have never seen one.
Yeah.
But I'm like, for me, it was like kind of, when I was living there for 2 years, it was like second nature to me.
Yeah.
Because after a while, you probably know, you get used to it.
Yeah.
I don't know if
Yeah.
you can get used to it, but it doesn't shock you as much
Right.
after
Yeah.
a while.
Yeah. It still excites me, but yeah, there's no shock anymore. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
the
still get
shocks.
excited. Yeah.
I think that's the big reason I want to go, try investigating, just to see if I can, something can rattle me or not.
I mean, I get creeped out sometimes still. I mean, especially places like, being by myself at like Brushy Mountain. I mean, me and my filming investigative partner went, and, we separated on purpose. We were filming, but then you just get kind of creeped out sometimes by yourself in a place like that because it's, that was a place of murder and mayhem and, especially Brushy Mountain in Petros, Tennessee, because it was the end of the line. So every inmate that was there was either on death row or had a life sentence. So they had nothing to lose.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of murders there. And so, but yeah, you get creeped out, but then you're just like, whatever,
Yeah. Now, at the house, have the investigators that come in to investigate, are they getting the same evidence, patterns that you've experienced there?
Yeah. Yeah. We kind of narrowed it down to probably about 3 or 4 resident kind of intelligent spirits that are kind of around all the time that lots of the teams and investigators get when they come in the house. And then we have what it seems like the Knight family. Some of them, none of them are around all the time, but they pop in sometimes, especially Ida, the daughter Ida, and then also JB, John Knight, JB Knight, he pops in and people get his name and him communicating. But we think we have, at least 3 or 4 resident intelligent spirits that hang out. And then we have quite a bit of residual stuff in the master bedroom. on the cameras I catch all the time. It'll in the middle of the night, like sounds like furniture moving and things like that, and doorknobs and footsteps. But that's just all to me. I think it's all residual because it happens
Yeah.
not on a regular basis, but at least a couple of times a month, to where it's kind of repetitious. So, but yeah, and it makes I love that because I get the validation on things that happen to me in the house, right? Whenever the investigators have the same interaction with the same spirit or have a similar experience that I've had when I'm there by myself or me and my husband are there, just the two of us, when they have the same experience, that's kind of pretty awesome. And also to observe every weekend, because I'm the one that gives all the history tours before I let them loose in the house to investigate. So I get to meet all the teams and talk to them, and then I check in with them throughout the night while they're investigating. And so it's almost like a long-term scientific study. We've had the house open since September 2024, and I can't even tell you how many teams we've had in the house. We've had quite a few that's come back 2 and 3 times already, just because they love the house. But I mean, you're talking we're booked almost every Friday, Saturday for a year and a half straight, and we're still. I mean, right now we're booked. The only bookings we have starts in July and goes in June and goes the rest of the year. So we say pretty booked up. But it's just nice to see that many teams. And then also to see the teams that have come back 2 and 3 times, that they're getting the same interaction when they come back with the same spirits, and kind of getting more and more proof that those entities are there and they are intelligent.
Yeah.
And having some of the same experiences. So yeah, so it's kind of like a long-term experiment that we get to see all this data from and similar experiences like you were asking about.
Yeah. I always like to, look at the patterns, coming from the history side, especially like, connecting the history to the evidence too,
Right. Yeah.
if you're getting a certain name or a certain, connect if you are able to see if you can connect it to the history. Now, what do you see, or where do you see the night house in 5 years? You know, on the preservation
Yeah.
side, paranormal side.
I think definitely renovation side, it'll be a lot more. I mean, we try to get as much as we can done, period. A lot of it is that I don't put online that people don't see is like the plumbing and things like that, that we're constantly working on. And actually right now we're going to have to replace the sewage pipe from the house all the way to the road. So that's
Oh,
something, I'll probably put some pictures up, but a lot of that stuff I don't put up because that's the boring stuff. People want to see when we're
yeah,
painting walls and putting up wallpaper and, stuff, moving walls and things like that. So I think in 5 years, we'll be fairly well along with, as far as the renovations go, and replacing a lot of the rotten wood and like the soffits in the sides of the roof and things and putting gutters on and that type of stuff and painting all the wood. And I think it's a 210-year-old house. I mean, I live in a 50-year-old house and there's always something to do. So
yeah,
210-year-old house, there's always going to be something to do. But I think we'll be pretty far along. And the house will never be a museum and will never be a nonprofit. That's not my intention. I'm not turning my house over to a committee of people to tell me what I can and can't do with it.
yeah,
What color I can paint something or if I have permission to paint something or not. No, we're not going down that route. Yeah. If anybody's familiar with what happened to you at Waverly Hills a couple of years ago, then you'll understand what I'm talking about. But there was a coup at Waverly Hills to kick the owners off the property, and they did it successfully for almost 2 years. And the
Oh,
board, yeah, it's a
no,
whole.
I wasn't familiar with that, but
There's a whole campaign that I was a part of with the podcast and everything called Save Waverly Hills. But it finally went back into the hands of the owners, rightful owners, where it should be. But that was because they have they're a nonprofit and they have a board that. But anyway, ultimately, I would like to see the city of Hopkinsville buy it from us and turn it into, since it is the oldest standing building in the city and the whole county, and there's such historical significance, not just for the Knights, but with J.P. Campbell, who we believe built the house, R.L. Waddell, who owned the house for 10 years, who was a politician, a Whig Party politician, and served in the Kentucky State House for 8 years. And even after the Knights, the Waddells, I mean, not the Waddells, the Rogers family, the father, W. Rogers Jr., who bought the house in 1948, he was the main prosecuting attorney for the 3-county area there, Trigg, Todd, and Christian counties. So he's pretty high up, with all the murder cases and all that stuff. He's the head guy. And then his son, Petey, became the same thing. He became the prosecuting attorney. But Petey also became the Commonwealth attorney, which is the attorney general of Kentucky for many, many, many years. And so
wow.
they were an influential, important family as well, And also at the Night House, up until the people we bought it from, every owner was a lawyer. which is crazy.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
that is
So,
kind of crazy.
yeah. So, which is very interesting. But also, we believe the house is part of the Underground Railroad. And we've actually had ground penetrating radar out, and we found two open tunnels. The only reason they put that much effort into something back then, there's two reasons: either hiding people for the Underground Railroad and bootlegging. Well, they could have done both in this house, because they went through
Yeah,
both eras of slavery and prohibition. And so the house has never, the property's never been a plantation. It was never anything like that. The families that lived there only farmed enough for themselves, and they only had enough enslaved people to help them do that. The most number of slaves that were ever on the property was when the Knights owned it. And when they bought it, they got the slaves with it. And they already had 5 domestic servants of their own that were house servants. And so when they moved onto the property, it became 16 total. But there's a lot of circumstantial evidence pointing toward Underground Railroad as well. So I'd love to see a historical marker from the state out there that this was a
yeah,
stop on
that
the
would be
Underground
nice.
Railroad. Yeah. And I'd love to see the city of Hopkinsville buy it and operate it as a museum, paying homage to all these families that were influential in building the town. And right now, the big struggle has been since it's always been a residence, to get the history out to the public in Hopkinsville and help them understand, that this was an important house and the people that lived here were very important and that this house needs to be preserved. I mean, it's on the National Register of Historic Places of the federal government, which is a good thing, but just getting people to recognize, this
Yeah,
is major Hopkintown history, but they need to put more stock in this place and people to even know it's there, and the families that live there.
yeah,
So that's my plan. We'll probably still own it in 5 years, but we just want to build it up for everybody to want to come there, whether it be for a history tour or, for the paranormal stuff. And like I said, use that money to put back into fixing the place up. And so the 5-year plan would be to get at least a state plaque out there with the Underground Railroad stuff on it.
yeah. So kind of moving on, I know you've wrote a book, believe
Yeah.
Small Town Haunts and Legends of Tennessee, kind
Yeah.
of focuses on stories and hauntings that most people haven't heard of. What drew you to the overlooked haunts instead of the famous ones?
Well, I just think like when you go to the big cities, I'm from Nashville. That's where I live. That's where I'm at right now. We travel to Hopkinsville on the weekends for the night house. But I mean, living outside of Nashville, I've heard about the hauntings of the Grand Ole Opry and other buildings and famous houses like Andrew Jackson's house, the Hermitage in Nashville, and various other places, Natchez Trace. And a lot of people know about those places because those stories are readily available online. If you just search them, just look them up. Even Knoxville and Chattanooga have like the Reading Hotel in Chattanooga. I'm trying to think of the famous theater in Knoxville, but they all have their own kind of places. And
Yeah,
Memphis has its own that a lot of people know. So I wanted to go around to all the small towns. For one, probably small towns that even if you live in Tennessee, you probably never heard of some of these small towns.
yeah,
But give a little history on that small town and that location, whether it be a house or a old hospital or whatever, and educate people about the history because I think it's important. Just like you were talking about earlier, it's important to know the history of a place to understand why it's haunted and who you might be connected
yeah,
to. So I've always said that 80% of what we do as an investigator is the history. 20% is connecting that history through the hauntings, right? And trying to talk to those people. So that's kind of the approach that I took with the book was to go to these small towns and not just ghost stories, but also the legends, the Bigfoot legends and the weird legends like the Wampus cat and the giant catfish, Catzilla, things like that. Just fun legends and stories and fun ghost stories of some of these places and just telling the history because some of the places, even though people have never heard of them, they have a significant history for our country. Fairview Plantation in Gallatin, Tennessee, I wrote about it. The brothers that built Fairview Plantation were the 2 worst enslavers in the history of our country. They bought and sold more slaves than anybody else. They also
wow.
owned more slaves than anybody else. And they were
Mm,
horrible, horrible people. They did unimaginable things to these people that were enslaved. They treated them just like property and like trash. And
ooh,
they became very, very rich. And so just telling that story to tell the history of those people that they don't teach that in history class about the worst slavers in history. I think they went through something like 18,000. They bought and sold 18,000 slaves or something over their history,
wow.
like an insane
That's
amount
that's
of
a
people.
lot.
Yeah, yeah, like this insane. But they would buy them in New Orleans and then sell them all over the country, because the port,
Yeah.
they came in the port in New Orleans, in Charleston and St. Augustine and other places. But just stories like that. And then stories of little small places too. Like there's one place called, affectionately known as the Paran's Nest, because while they were trying to paint the front porch, they couldn't for a whole season because this nest of birds nested and had babies. And so, but it just, the ghost story is that, there's this little old guy who lived there until he died of old age. And he used to sit, it's, down on Main Street on the sidewalk, the house is, and he used to sit in his rocking chair on the front porch and wait to people. And it's just nice older gentleman. People stop by and talk to him. And he passed away, and people still see him sitting in the rocking chair, or the rocking chair will rock on its own, and so they say, that's all, I forget his name. They say, oh, that's just Mr. So-and-so, doing the same thing he did for years. So, and there's another plantation house that the enslaved lady who's the cook, they let her have a pet parrot, a pet macaw parrot. And to this day in the summer kitchen, people still hear and see the parrot, and they hear and see her as well. So I'd never heard about the haunting of a parrot before either. So, and that's just kind of the cliff notes, but just interesting hauntings like that too, But yeah, just to teach people something about history, but also entertain with the ghost stories, but also to find the most interesting history and make sure there was meat on the bone with that history of the place, enough to tell a story, at least a half page to a page story. And right now I'm working on the Kentucky version. So Small Town Haunts and Legends of Kentucky will be out later this year, and kind of along the same vein as the Tennessee book.
Oh, very nice. So when you're researching for your books, how do you separate kind of the folklore from what might actually have some historical foundation?
Well, who am I to say what's true and not? Right.
Yeah.
I wanted to get the history as right as I can through the research, through various books, websites. Like I will hunt down the history to make sure that the people's names are right. The dates are as right as I can get them. As far as like the ghost stories, it's just making sure that the source that I get it from is from somebody who's really connected to that property in a way, whether it be investigators who really were allowed to investigate, or the owners, somebody who had owned the house or lived in the house. So just making sure that it comes from a reliable source like that to say, or multiple. Some of them have multiple, stories that I found from multiple people who had lived there, who had visited there. So it's just making sure that people were legit to vet the story, because you really can't vet the ghost stories. I mean, it's a personal experience.
Yeah.
I wasn't there. But also, I think the folklore is just as important. I think storytelling is very important in our country, too. I think folklore is history dating back to, the founding colonies, especially the Appalachian Mountains, where I'm from. I mean, Nashville's the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains, and like East Tennessee and North Carolina and through Kentucky, the Appalachian people, those people mostly came from Ireland and Scotland. And they settled in the hills because that's what they were used to from their native countries. Yeah. And so that's where the hillbilly accent comes from too. The country accent is just a slowed down version of Irish and Scottish.
Yeah.
But it's a huge history of storytelling, because that's all they had to do back then in the mountains, work and tell stories. And some of them they made up, some were true, some they embellished, so I think it's a harken back to our ancestors in this country too. There's a huge storytelling festival every year in East Tennessee, in the mountains. And it's just a pastime that, I mean, not even that long ago in our history, you got to think that was a huge thing still, because we didn't have TV, but you had radio. On radio, they had to tell stories. They couldn't show you pictures, and even movies, tell stories. And that's what we're entertained by. So I think storytelling and folklore is very important in our society. It also keeps us connected as people, because right now I'm on your podcast telling stories, Yeah. And it's just like folklore, handing down stories and handing down folklore and that type of stuff. And it's entertainment, but you also learn something from it too, because a lot of like the Appalachian folklore, and even like some of these legends that I wrote about in the book, there are purposes for the legend. So a lot of time it's warning you of something. So like in the Tennessee Wildman that I wrote about, I found a newspaper article from the early 1800s where they said, keep your kids, your wife, and your dog, your animals in the house after dark, or the Tennessee Wildman's going to come snatch them up. Well, that's where you get, but then you get into the wood booger, which is where boogeyman comes from. In Appalachia, the wood booger, you tell your kids, don't go out in the woods, the wood booger will get you. You better go to bed because the wood booger's out, and that's where the boogeyman comes from. It got shortened at some point in time to boogeyman. And so there's things like that those stories become ingrained in our culture because my parents told me about the boogeyman when I was a kid to scare me. You know what I'm saying? And like, yeah. So I just find it fascinating with the storytelling and stuff. And it's almost to the point, like I said, I want to get the history as true as possible. And I want to get the stories as true as possible to the people that are telling them. But if you ask me if I care if they're real or not, I don't, especially if they're
Yeah,
entertaining, you know,
yeah,
because I've got plenty of stories that happen to me, but they sound far fetched, you know, because the crazy shit I've experienced in the paranormal. And
yeah,
so, you know, but I wasn't there, so I can't say what was real and what's not either, you know.
yeah. And you're still preserving, the history
Yeah.
of the
Yeah.
folklore,
Yeah.
getting it writing.
Yeah. Also the history of those places, because a
Yes.
lot of these historical places are being torn down, you know, and so at least there's something out there in writing that tells the ghost stories of the place or tells the folklore of the place and tells some history about it, you know.
Yeah. And this like I this podcast, I started it because I like to hear stories
Yeah.
and document the stories. So, I can really relate with that. So kind of you had your first paranormal encounter when you were what, 8 years old, if
Yeah.
I remember
Yeah.
correctly.
That I can remember.
That you can
That's all I
remember.
remember.
Does anything truly rattle you now overall? I know you said you get a little bit excited at some
Yeah.
locations, but is there anything now that really rattles you or
I think
uh
the one thing I don't like is, and this is one of the rules at the night house that I've explained to the spirits. I don't want anything popping up behind me in a mirror. To me,
oh
that's just creepy and unnerving. And I've had it happen a couple times, not at the night house, but here at my own house, where I've probably had stuff follow me home before. But I'll be in the bathroom, like shaving in the mirror, you know, or washing my hands or whatever, and I'll see something behind me in the mirror. That to me is unnerving because
yeah, that
you want to show yourself full on, right?
yeah.
I think also the other thing that unnerves me, and I'll explain why, is any ghost that shows himself without a head. So I think like disembodied hands or like legs or something is really creepy. Because I think as humans, we pay attention to facial expressions. And so if I can't see their head and their face, then I don't know their intentions, right?
Yeah.
So just a pair of hands or something, you know, coming out of the wall or like a pair of legs running, that to me, that's really creepy. Like I'd be like, no, I'm not going after that. Like, you know, I'm not trying to figure out what that is. That's just messed up.
Now you started the Unseen Paranormal podcast to kind of promote diversity in the paranormal field. What does that mean in practice, and why did it matter enough to make it your mission kind of on your podcast?
Well, I think the culture is starting to shift. I saw it starting to shift last year. I've done many public ghost hunts that I've hosted over the years at various locations around Tennessee and Kentucky. And so kind of seeing the evolution of the paranormal fan. When I started the podcast, for one, let's rewind. Back when I was 18 and I was already investigating, I had already investigated since I was like 14, going to cemeteries, sneaking into places, you know, never doing any vandalism, no harm, no nothing, but just trying to, you know, experience something. And I had a group of friends that did it with me. And when I was 18, I saw a group in Nashville who was looking for investigators. And this is right when the internet, we still had dial up internet, and internet starting to become a big thing.
Yeah.
So I applied to be on their team. Well, they told me that, well, you don't have any experience. Well, how am I supposed to get experience if you're not going to let me learn? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And this is not like now where there's so many teams everywhere. You know,
Yeah.
this is when teams were few and far between. And I got a book for Christmas when I was 17 or 18. That was the beginning guide for ghost hunters. And I didn't even know people got together as groups and did this all the time, you know, and named themselves and things until I read that book. And I'm serious. One of my friends got me that book. And then I figured out, you know, people actually do this as a group, as a hobby. That's awesome. You know, I love it. But yeah, I applied for 2 or 3 groups and they wouldn't take me because I didn't have experience. I'm like, well, that's a catch 22. Like, how do you get experience if nobody will give me experience?
Yeah.
And so then I just saw like this with the TV shows, like this bro culture, especially like this frat boy bro culture with quite a few of the shows. And then also the absence of women for the most part in the shows. And definitely, you know, I'm a gay man. Me and my husband together 20 years. And definitely an absence of any gays on the show. And not saying that every show has to have a gay person or a woman or, you know, I'm not saying that
Yeah.
at all. But we're all here in the paranormal. And so the
Yeah.
TV shows to just skim over that and it's all white men is ridiculous to me. And I'm not being one of these big people that representation has to be everywhere, whatever. But you're skimming over really well-known people, women and other people of color who really know what they're doing in this field that are very experienced veterans. They're skimming over them for some pretty, I don't know, a Hollywood casting call,
Yeah.
instead of real people in this field. And instead of showing diversity in the field like we have, and also I think that it takes all of us because men and women, we have two completely different styles of investigating,
Yeah.
and also each individual person, because of their culture and stuff, has, so, I'm Cherokee Indian. So for me to investigate somebody who's white and Caucasian, or somebody who is of Spanish descent, that's Roman Catholic, we all come from different viewpoints of our
Yeah.
culture and our ancestors. And so I just think it takes all of us. And so why is it bad to promote diversity, And it wasn't just on TV and stuff because they can do whatever they want. It was more promoting diversity in the field because I was seeing a lot online of these guy teams putting down women and how women weren't as good investigators and blah blah blah, and then seeing derogatory terms about, the derogatory term for gays don't belong in our field and things like that. No, you don't belong in our field, because if you don't understand that the spirits that we investigate are just as diverse as we are, then you're an idiot. If you think they're
Yeah.
all bro culture white men, you're stupid.
Yeah.
And you wonder why you don't get any evidence, because when you go in the house with that bravado, these women from the past, they're not going to talk to you.
Nope.
And the men aren't either, because they weren't like that. And so it's understanding the culture also of what we're investigating. So it was just a part of just a mission of my podcast that I would have everybody on my show, no matter what, and
Yeah.
not even consciously looking to do, okay, well, this shows a man, this shows a woman, this shows a man, this shows a woman, this is a gay guy, this is a lesbian. Not that, just to say I'm going to talk to who I find interesting. I don't care if they're a paracelebrity. I don't care if it's a team from a town of 500 people. If I think that
Yeah.
they have something interesting to say, and I can have an interesting conversation with them, then I'm going to have them on my show. And
Yeah.
instead of these big giant podcasts that get millions of downloads, that they'll have 20 men on and one woman. Well, that's stupid, because we're a mixed, varied group of people. And
Yeah.
so, people don't have to come on and talk about sexuality or whatever, but we're still here.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and we're a sum of our experiences as people. And so I think we all have something to bring to the table based on who we are and our experiences in life. And I think it's going to take all of us to try to unravel this and figure it out. I've seen some ladies who are amazing investigators, and they have a rapport with the spirits that they're contacting like nobody else have ever seen, and they get responses like nobody else have ever seen. It's just incredible.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, that was part of the whole thing of diversity with my podcast, was trying to make sure I got a good snapshot of the whole paranormal community, but also not just to talk about ghosts, which is my forte, because I was interested in talking about skinwalkers and Bigfoot and aliens and things I don't know anything about, and
Yeah.
learning that way. So just kind of diversity all around, not the kumbaya tree hugging stuff, but just to say,
Yeah.
my podcast, I had big people on and little people, and it didn't matter. I treated everybody exactly the same.
Yeah. Very similar to what I try to do.
Yeah,
If I find a team interesting, I'll ask them to come on. Because like I said, I like to hear the stories. I like to hear everybody's stories. One of my friends in Thailand, I had him on. We
yeah,
talked about the difference between, you know, what ghosts are and spirits, demons, and all that over in the East compared to
yeah,
the West.
right,
That just fascinated me. I
yeah,
learned
yeah,
so much during that I didn't even realize. And kind of his take on the US paranormal on how we do things over here.
right,
I try to do a variety, and I like, similar to what I think you do. I dive into the cryptids, UFOs, not just the ghost as well, because I like all that stuff. So if it interests me, and you said, if you have a good conversation, then that's, I think that's how podcasts should be done.
Well, and also I started my podcast from a selfish standpoint too, of like, I don't care if anybody listens, but this gives me a platform to talk to people who would otherwise be hard for me to reach that are on TV and stuff, right?
Yeah,
So, okay, I want to talk to one of the ghost hunters. Well, I can't just call them up and talk to them as Eric, the plain paranormal investigator. But as a podcast, I can get their email to their agent or whatever. I can send it to them and I can talk to as a member of the media. And
yeah,
so that it really was that selfish reason too. If anything comes of it, that's awesome. And I worked my butt off at it too to
yeah,
become a pretty good sized podcast. But yeah, the motive was selfish too, of like, I want to talk to who I want to talk to and learn. And I just thought I had the same curiosity as the people that are probably going to listen to my show too. So I'm going to ask the questions that they want to know the answers to, because I don't know anything
yeah,
about Bigfoot really, or time slips, or, any of that stuff, or even like, even with the ghost stuff of like, well, I don't know anything about the Sorrel Weed House in Savannah, but now I'm going to have
yeah,
somebody on to talk about it, and then we'll all learn. Yeah,
yeah. And that's very similar to what I do. I really enjoy learning about places and well, creatures or, I never thought like 5 years ago that I'd be sitting down and talking to someone, an hour about vampires.
right, right. Yeah, or even like somebody in Thailand, like you're talking about, like across the
Yeah,
world. Yeah,
yeah,
I've talked to people in New Zealand. One of my good buddies, one of my good paranormal buddies, is in Malta. His name's Warner Juice. He's an incredible resource on UFOs, as far as like
yeah,
the historical sightings and stuff, and an incredible guy to talk to. Just he's on my show multiple times, and just a really really sweetheart of a guy.
yeah,
And one of my favorite accents I've ever heard in my life when he speaks English. And he's from Malta, which is an island off of Italy. But just other
yeah,
people around the world. Like I've been up at 4 in the morning to talk to somebody in Australia because it was more convenient for them, or
yeah.
to talk to somebody in England, or yeah, yeah. So yeah, just incredible. It's just
Well,
awesome.
one of my episodes that I did, I was with someone in England, and we did it at like 3 o'clock in the afternoon because it was evening his time.
Yeah,
It was just easier on him.
yeah, yeah.
I know you are the event coordinator for GoblinCon.
Uh,
I think last year you guys, it was quite big. I
yeah,
believe
yeah.
this year what is it, August 22nd, 23rd
Yes.
in Hopkinsville. For anyone who's never heard of the Goblin Con or the event, kind of, I think it was inspired by the Kelly
Green Man.
Hopkinsville Goblin
Yeah,
incident.
yeah.
Would you be able, are you quite familiar with with
Oh
that?
yeah.
Give us like a 60-second
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
overview of it.
Yeah, and Geraldine Sutton Stith, who it happened to her family, it was her grandmother's farm. I've talked to her quite extensively about it. So the Cliff Notes in 1955, August 21st, 1955, in the little town of Kentucky, which is about 5 minutes outside of Hopkinsville, there was a spacecraft that landed in the evening, right before this family was fixed to sit down and have dinner. This was a family farm. The lady who owned it was a widow. Her husband had just died the year before, and her oldest son was 18, and his name was Lucky Sutton. And that was Geraldine's dad. Geraldine is the one who comes to Goblin Con. She's the one that does lectures and writes the books. And it was her dad that was 18 at the time. And he had brought two of his friends, a gentleman named Bubba and his girlfriend, with him for dinner at his mom's house on this farm. And all of his siblings, all the rest of the siblings were pretty young, like 10 and under. And so Bubba went to get some water out of the well, and he came back really bright eyed and scared and said he saw a spacecraft land on the property back behind the house. Well, they thought, "What are you doing, Bubba? Like, what do you, what?" Grandma didn't know, she was a staunch Christian, so she did not allow alcohol on the property. And she's like, "What, have you been in some moonshine or something? You need to leave." She was not up with moonshine or anything like that. And he swore up and down what he saw, and he took them outside to show them. Well, when they started walking back in the house, one of these little creatures reached down off the roof and tried to grab him by his hair and pull him on the roof. Well, then Grandma saw it, and so did Lucky, her son. And they ran back in the house and got the shotguns and their rifles. And they proceeded to fight these little, somewhere along the way, it turned into the green men, but they're actually little silver creatures. And they proceeded to fight them off for the next 5 hours until finally it subsided a little bit, that they snuck out and went to town and got the sheriff. The sheriff came back and investigated, didn't find anything, but found all the bullet holes in their house. Well, these were poor people. They didn't shut out all their own windows. They're all through their doors, their walls. They don't have the money to fix this. They're also, like I said, Grandma was a staunch Christian. There's no moonshine or anything like that in her house. And also, all the little kids 10 and under were hiding on the bed while this was happening, but they saw these things too. So everybody described the same thing. And they took 3 of the adults aside. And these are, if you look up the Hobgoblins and Goblins, you'll see these sketches. All 3 sketches are so similar, even though they pulled 3 adults aside separately and asked them to describe them. And essentially, if you've seen the movie Gremlins, that's what they look like. Because
Yep.
the Gremlins in the movie Gremlins were based off of the Hopkinsville Goblins. And also Steven Spielberg based off Hopkinsville Goblins. Originally, he was going to make a horror movie about that incident. And then since Close Encounters had just come out, he decided to make a family-friendly movie. But he's still with the long spindly arms of E.T. And kind of the weirdness of him, he was inspired by the Hopkinsville Goblin incident. After the sheriff left, go back to the story, after the sheriff left, the goblins came back for another couple hours until the sun came up. When the sun came up, they just kind of went away and never came back. 2 weeks later, Grandma Sutton sold the farm and moved to an apartment in Hopkinsville because she was so afraid that we'd come back. And
Wow.
so, yeah. And so Geraldine Sutton Stith was not born then. Like I said, her father was 18. She did not find out about it because her dad never talked about it. Her family never talked about it until I think she was 8 or 9 years old, like in the 60s or 70s. And then she's kind of carried on the family story and kind of righting the wrongs and the truths. And I think she has 3 books out about the incident, and she goes all around the country lecturing. She's one of our speakers at GoblinCon, was last year and this year. The whole reason GoblinCon got started last year was Visit Hopkinsville, which is the Tourist and Convention Bureau for Christian County, Kentucky, wanted to celebrate the 70th anniversary, which was last year, of the Hopkinsville Goblins. And so they called Geraldine up and asked her if she'd be interested in us honoring her family's legacy. And she said, yeah. So she became part of it. And then they hired me as the event coordinator. So they took it out to bidding process. I bid for the job and I won the bid. And so they liked me last year. So they rehired me this year.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah.
And what can people expect for this year?
So this year's even bigger than last year. Last year we had 40 something vendors. We had 2 full days of speakers. This year we've gone even bigger. So this year we're going to have upwards of 60 vendors. We have two full days of speakers. We have Dave Schrader is one of our big speakers. We have Geraldine Sutton Stith. We have Ron Murphy, as you were saying, good friends with him. We have Ken Gerhard. We have David Eller. Ken Gerhard, for anybody who doesn't know, he's the cryptic guy you see on TV all the time with the black cowboy hat. He's been on over 100 something shows. Ken's a great guy. I've been friends with him for a few years too. But him and David Eller is another cryptozoologist, Bigfoot guy. They are going to do the first ever, as far as I know, debate at a con of Bigfoot flesh and blood versus Bigfoot woo. Ken Gerhard believes that Bigfoot is flesh and blood. David Eller believes that Bigfoot is supernatural. So they're going to have a presidential style debate on stage.
That's going to be, that sounds cool.
Yeah. And so we come up with that idea last year during GoblinCon, and I was like, well, if you 2 will come back next year, we'll do it. So they agreed to come back this year. So they're going to have a presidential style debate on real Bigfoot being real versus being supernatural. So that'll be awesome. We also have a puppet show coming called Kentucky's Friendliest Puppets, Kentucky's Friendliest Cryptids. And they're like Muppet style puppets from an improv troupe from Chicago. And they're going to do 2 shows on Saturday, which should be a good fun because they're going to have Bigfoot and the goblins and, all these puppets. It will be fun for kids and families. This year's the 40th anniversary of Maximum Overdrive, the movie. If you've ever seen it, where the trucks come alive.
Yeah.
So the big goblin truck that's the leader, the Happy Toys truck with the big goblin, Green Goblin. The Green Goblin part of the truck is coming to GoblinCon. A gentleman named Tim Shockey found it a few years ago, had it completely restored, and he also has a movie memorabilia museum that comes with it. So he's got like an original Freddy Krueger glove signed by Robert Englund. He's got a Jason mask signed by Kane Hodder. Yeah. So
wow.
Yeah, so he's got all this cool stuff, and you can take a picture with the big Green Goblin head that was on in front of the truck. We have the Parapeculiar Museum of Haunted Objects is coming. They are awesome people, and their museum looks incredible. I can't wait to see it. It's in a 30-foot trailer that you can walk through and see the objects and talk to them about the stories that they were given about the objects, why they're supposed to be haunted. They also have equipment like K2s and stuff that you can walk through with to see if you get anything off of the objects as you walk through.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Kind of
so,
interactive.
and they have like a spirit portal where you might be able to ask questions about an object and have the spirits tell you about it themselves, come through the spirit portal. So they're also going to be speakers talking about haunted objects. Nicole and Damien, who run that. There's so much stuff going on this year. It's GoblinCon for kids 12 and under are free. So we have a whole Goblin fun zone, little Goblin fun zone. It was called outside. So we're gonna have a water slide and bounce houses, and then we'll have about 20 arcade machines that are free to play inside. Yeah, just a fun for the whole family. It's only $10 a person per day. We do not nickel and dime you. For that $10, you have access to everything: the workshops, the
Wow,
speakers, the vendors. Yeah, everything.
that's a really, really good deal.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you want to do even more for the whole weekend, we have $150 VIP passes, which includes a special screening of a top secret TV show pilot. It's going to be we're calling it the green carpet rollout for this TV show pilot that will be out as a TV show next year. So they'll get to
Oh,
screen it before anybody else. And then they'll get into GoblinCon on Saturday an hour beforehand. VIPs will to shop the vendors, and then they get preferred front row seating for the speakers. They get a bunch of swag and shirts and stuff for GoblinCon that nobody else gets. And then on Saturday night, we are doing our VIP meet and greet dinner with all the speakers, and we'll have a band there. So all of the VIPers get to mingle with the speakers and talk to them all night and get free food and yeah, just have a good time and mingle. So pretty good deal for $150, I think, for
yeah,
2.5 full days
that's
of entertainment. So yeah,
that's sounds like it.
yeah,
Just a couple more questions. For someone who is sitting at home right now, who's been living, in a haunted house or, you know, near a haunted house, what would you tell them to do? Like if they think their house is haunted or the land live on is haunted, what would your advice be?
I always tell everybody, especially if you're kind of scared of it and don't know what to do, is own your space. We're living, they're not. This is your space. You don't have to be mean or disrespectful. Usually, the more respectful you are, the more often they will listen to you. But if it scares you and they're making noises and stomping around, just simply tell them, hey, this is my house. This is where I live. And you're scaring me. I don't want you to do that. I'm trying to go to bed. I'm trying to watch TV, whatever. Or you're scaring my kids. Or, please, please cross over, move on. Like I'm not the one to
Yeah,
carry on whatever message that you want or to give you attention. We're just not doing this. And so own your space. A lot of times, now that doesn't happen 100% of the time because you have ornery spirits. And I always say that if they're an asshole in life, they're probably an asshole in death. So you're going
yeah,
to get some of the, why would their attitude change? So you're going to get some ornery spirits that don't want to move on. That's when you'll call a paranormal team that is reputable, that has been doing it for many years, and they also will never charge you money. If anybody ever asks you for money to investigate your house, go on to the next one because that is not. Do not ever pay anybody to come investigate your house. That's ridiculous. But there's plenty of veteran teams out there around the country who can come and help you figure out what's going on with it, and they can also, if they know what they're doing well enough, if they can't do something about it, they can find somebody. They have a resource network that they can, talk to
yeah,
somebody that can come help that spirit crossover or whatever. But yeah, a lot of the times just saying, hey, I don't care. You're scaring me. I don't want this. Leave me alone. And just also understand that, they were people too. They're just in a different form, you know.
yeah,
And so they can't hurt you. They're not gonna do anything to you, for the most part. And as far as like the demonic and the evil stuff, that is way few and far between. I've never come across anything demonic. I've come across some evil, nasty spirits who want to cuss you and make you think they're all big and bad. Like
make you think they are.
some animals puff up, to make themselves look bigger when they're not. That's what some of these spirits do. But you're just like, come on, man. No,
Yeah,
this is not your house anymore. This is mine. This is my space. You know. But yeah, be respectful and just get. If you need to get a little more forceful, get a little more forceful. But yeah, I
yeah,
think that's the first thing I would do. And then, like I said, escalate it to a reputable team in your area who can give you references for one, of other private investigations they've done and stuff. And if you need to contact me, I know people all over the country that are reputable, and I'll find somebody to help you if you really need help.
yeah. Yeah, basically anyone, and you can contact anyone that does like you do podcasts, I do podcasts.
Yeah,
Most of us have quite the network now.
right.
you
We
can
know a lot of
we can
people. Yeah,
tap into.
right,
Um,
right.
but one last question for you: where can they, if any investigators are watching, book
Yeah,
an investigation at your house, or at GoblinCon as well and find your books?
Yeah. So pretty much the only social media that I do is Facebook, but you can find Eric Freeman Sims on there. I have a public page. GoblinCon also has a page, GoblinCon KY, and that's also the website is goblinconky.com. All the info is there to buy tickets. Tickets are on sale right now. VIP tickets are on sale, and all the information that we have about everything going on at GoblinCon. As far as the Night House, you can find the Night House KY on Facebook, and you can find us at the Night House, and that's KNIGHT, the nighthouseky.com. And if you want to do a half night or overnight, you can go in there and see the dates that we have on our website for the 7 p.m. to 3 a.m. or the 7 p.m. to 9 a.m. We have beds you can sleep in. We have heat and air conditioning and all that good stuff. We have 2 fully functional bathrooms. You can even take a shower if you need to. All of that with the overnight stuff. And so if anybody is interested in a full weekend from Friday at 7 p.m. till 9 a.m. on Sunday and do 2 nights, it's $600. And you have to give me a call to set those up. But my number is on Facebook. It's the business number that's on the website and all that, so people can get a hold of me that way. And if they have any questions, they can always call or text me or email me as well through the Night House website or through Facebook Messenger. But I'm not hard to find at all. And Small Town Haunts and Legends of Tennessee is available through Amazon and Kindle. And the Small Town Haunts and Legends of Kentucky will be out in a few months. I'll announce the release date on Facebook when I get there. I'm halfway through right now. I'm also working on another book called Strange Chapters, Stories from My Haunted Life. So how my first full body apparition experience at 8 years old, all the way up until today, and kind of how the paranormal's always been around. It's somewhat autobiographical with a lot of ghost stories and things thrown in as well. So, and then also places I've been and done public investigations and things like that, stories of things that have had happen at Thomas House in Riverland Springs, Tennessee, and Rosemont, Gallatin, and like all these places I've been many different times, and all the different things that's happened. And so that should be fun. It's kind of scary to put a book out like that because there's some very personal things in there too. But I want to share that. I think if it helps some people, then even better. But yeah, Facebook, you can find me. If you Google me, I'm the first 5 pages on Google. So from all the podcasts I've guest on and the podcasts I've done, everything else I've done. So just Eric Freeman Sims on Google.
Okay. And I'll put your links in the description.
Yeah.
Well, Eric, it's been great. I thank you for coming on today.
I think it's a good conversation. It goes by so fast when you're having a good conversation.
Oh, it does. It goes by really quick. And folks, if you want to dig deeper into, Eric's book, or you can check that out on Amazon, and
and the podcast, the Unseen Paranormal podcast,
yes,
is available anywhere you get your music or podcast. Even on YouTube, I didn't do video, but you can still listen to audio. There's 170 episodes. So right now I'm on hiatus since last year because I'm so busy, but at some point in time I'll pick the show back up. But until then, you have 170 episodes. So you should be able to pass some time with those.
Yeah, I'll have all that in the description below. And again, GoblinCon returns August 22nd and 23rd, 2026. And I'll have that link below as well. If you liked tonight's episode, hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already, ring the bell so you never miss a haunting episode. Drop a comment. Would you buy a 200-year-old haunted house? Comment below if you would. And, until next time, history never truly dies. It just finds new ways to haunt us. Keep digging into the darkness.